Or before we do that, just let's go and listen to, before the program started, that's the National Economic Program Forum started, the NPP's press conference and the reasons for boycotting that particular forum. We'll just listen to them briefly. We'll listen to the president. We'll listen to Dr. The Ashasi president, Patrick Ewua, who read the 22 points that was arrived at, tagged or named the Senchi consensus. We'll get to all of that, and then the discussion will get underway. I'll introduce my guests also to you. So let's hear what the NPP had to say, even before the forum.
How can the government call stakeholders to such an important forum at such short notice and expect any meaningful contribution in this national discourse? This is a clear manifestation that the government is just being disingenuous, and that the supposed National Economic Forum is really intended to be a PR gimmick. You are inviting us to come and discuss this? Something that we will have no impact at all? Just to provide a smoke screen to say Ghanaians have all agreed something? When Dr. Bawumia started making very useful, critical, constructive criticism of our economy, you are all here, you are the media, you are all here. You saw what happened. Minority leader referred to it. The attack dogs were unleashed on him. They called him names. They even doubted his academic credentials.
Right, so that was the NPP's chairman, Paul Afoko, telling us why they will not and why they did not attend the National Economic Forum. Let's hear Dr. Patrick Ewua, president of the Ashasi University, read out the 22 points consensus that was arrived at and supposed to be the solution going forward to transform the economy of this country. Okay, I'm told we have some difficulties with that sound. We'll get it ready and share it with you. In any case, I have the whole, communique here, and we'll be sharing them with you as well. But after that, the president also had a few things to say. Let's hear what the president had to say about the outcome.
In early April this year, therefore, we decided to aggregate all these measures and initiatives into a single document, and we presented it to the representatives of the people of Ghana in Parliament. A more detailed version of the document that was read in Parliament was later presented to the IMF as part of our Article 4 consultations that it undertakes with all its member states. The briefs that were presented to Parliament and then later to the IMF under our Article 4 consultation represent work in progress and will be finalized through broad consultations, such as the forum we are holding here today. It is a tragedy of our very polluted and extremely partisan political environment that such a simple misunderstanding of the relevance of this innocuous document should become the basis for a major political player to stay away from this all-important exercise.
Right, so what you just heard the president speak about, the President John Dramani Mahama speak about, this was the opening, and he sought to give reasons why the NPP's boycotts, particularly the reason based on the document that's been circulated to the IMF, was not a good, one. Let's go back and then listen.
We, the participants, agreed on the following. 1, that the directive principles of state policy, Chapter 6 of the 1992 Constitution, must continue to guide the national development effort and anchored in a long-term national development framework with a compelling vision. That the long-term interests of the nation should supersede all other interests. That the state encourages and promotes indigenous entrepreneurship and continues to execute projects and programs commenced by the previous government. Foster a state whose day-to-day management is supported by a professionally competent civil service working in an environment devoid of political victimization and intimidation, and where support for the government is not interpreted as political affiliation. It is imperative to strengthen the public accounts and finance committees of Parliament to play their oversight responsibilities more effectively, and also to develop a mechanism for effective synergy and coordination between the monitoring units of ministries, departments and agencies, the National Development Planning Commission, and the Office of the President. 6, that a mechanism to effectively monitor, evaluate, and reform the use of statutory funds transferred to the public sector institutions such as the District Assembly Common Fund, National Health Insurance Authority, Ghana Education Trust must be established. 7, that government should establish a one-stop shop for investments, electronic templates to simplify business processes, streamline the activities of the Ghana Export Promotion Council, Ghana Investment Promotion Council, and Free Zones Board, and strengthen the capacity of the Ghana Statistical Service and other statistical reporting agencies to deliver reliable and timely economic and social statistics for planning, research, and development. 8, the Ministry of Finance should, as a matter of urgency, review the targets set in the 2014 budget. The review must identify likely deviations and make proposals for plugging the resulting financing gap, while the Bank of Ghana traces the implications of the revisions for monetary policy. 9, that a mechanism must be established to realign the budget whenever the economy is affected by unanticipated shocks. 10, government must strengthen the regulatory authorities to protect consumers and ensure the enforcement of standards. 11, further steps must be taken to support small, medium enterprises in order to protect jobs. 12, that further efforts must be made to improve the efficiency of tax collection, as well as broaden the tax base and reduce recourse to the introduction of new taxes. The incidence of discretionary tax exemptions should be reviewed and reduced. 13, Bank of Ghana should expedite work on assessment of the recently announced foreign exchange measures and take speedy and appropriate action to restore confidence and relieve the unintended consequences of the measures. 14, consideration should be given to the amendment of the Bank of Ghana Act to set a ceiling on its lending to government that is based on government's revenue collection in the previous year rather than the current year as is currently the case. This should be separated from the ceiling on total net domestic borrowing by government. 15, an investment program to deal with the energy crisis must be put in place as a matter of urgency in order to propel growth, employment, competitiveness, and macroeconomic stability. 16, the government must take steps to revamp the manufacturing and agricultural sectors to encourage domestic production of some agricultural products as well as import substitutable manufactured goods. 17, Ghana needs accelerated implementation of the current plan to develop the interbank foreign exchange and money markets to ensure active primary and secondary trading. 18, for the purposes of encouraging high national productivity, government, labor, and the private sector must collaborate to institute a management and labor productivity crusade, including the introduction of a service charter that ensures that productivity is matched with remuneration. 19. Take steps to develop long-term financing instruments to minimize reliance on short-term financing. 20. That a clear and simplified policy framework to help grow and migrate the informal sectors into the formal economy is urgently required. As such, steps must be taken to simplify business registration process and non-mandatory SNIT contribution up to a minimum number of employees by informal sector operators. 21. We, your fellow Ghanaians, recognize that social economic development is a journey, not a destination. As such, efforts to build a national consensus and long-term plan must also take the mode of a journey. We therefore recommend that the National Economic Forum be institutionalized and that a committee be set up to
You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis show. Now, let me introduce you to my guest. And the gentleman you just heard read out the 22-point Senchi consensus is Dr. Patrick Ewura. He is the president of Ashesi University. In the studio with me this morning, Abdul Malik Kubaku Jr., our regular panelist, who is the editor-in-chief of the New Crusading Guide newspaper. Good morning, Abdul Malik, and welcome to the show. We also have, and I suppose you're joining us for the first time on this show, Nana Ofori Owusu. He is Director of Operations for the Progressive People's Party, PPP, former Special Assistant to Dr. Parkwesi Indum, when he was Energy Minister, when he was Public Sector Reform Minister, and I guess any other place where he went. All right, you're welcome to the show this morning.
Thank you very much.
Great. And we have also Asamoah Boateng, certainly. I don't remember, I'm just trying to recollect the last time you were on this show.
I haven't been on this show since 2008.
Since 2008. That's interesting. Well, and I'm sure you know Mr. Asamoah Boateng. Mr. Asamoah Boateng, former Minister of Information. He was former Minister also of local government also, and did quite a bit of stuff within government. But this morning, his input is most critical because he was also the chairman of the National Development Dialogue under President John Agyekum Kufuor. You would have heard the President, John Mahama, mention that as a precedent. We also have Abdul Rashid Perpo. He is MP Wa Central, and he is the minister at the presidency in charge of PPPs. Good morning and welcome.
Thank you.
Great. Now, let's set the ball rolling. And the very first issue that we are looking at is the National Economic Forum. We're looking at the Senchi Consensus. Mr. Pepo, you were there, and you sat through the whole process, and so maybe good to start with you. First of all, your impressions, how the process went, and the conclusions.
Well, the process, thank you very much, and good morning to our listeners and viewers. The process was very well streamlined, transparent, and I was very impressed with the level of participation and enthusiasm. There was clear thinking on the part of participants. Representation came from all over, from the private sector, professional groups. I remember when professional groups was not mentioned, somebody rose up and said, "We didn't hear about Ghana Bar Association." and the whole hall was, it was a good break. And then there were politicians, very well-meaning politicians, and there were ordinary, everyday people, managing directors, as well as some other people who were all enthused about what was happening.
You have an idea what the criteria was for selecting who was to participate?
Well, Ghanaians, I don't know about the criteria, but essentially I was impressed with the level of participation and the types of people who were there. I mean, almost everybody, you have chiefs, you have queen mothers, you have workers of all, teachers, everybody were institutional representation, NGOs, development agencies, everybody.
I asked that question because, and without meaning to endorse, you know, the public ridicule of the involvement of Madam Ekwe-Adonko of that party, is it Ghana Freedom Party or so? Some are asking, so what went into it? How could she have made her way into that meeting? Because people hold the view that she couldn't contribute to anything.
No, but she's a political party representative, and all political parties were invited. And if she chose not to send somebody but to be represented by herself, I mean, it was good. And I thought that it was the best thing to happen to her and to her party and to the people of Ghana, that we accept all people, no matter your level of education, your thinking, your affiliation, everything. I mean, it's essential that we set those standards and we go by it.
No, but you're obviously not saying that it is okay to invite people who do not have the capacity to appreciate what was going on.
How would you know? I mean, I'm surprised that Ghanaians must be very careful the way they analyze.
She was asked on radio about IMF and she asked what animal that was.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Essentially, she might not know what IMF is, but she knows about Ghana going to take loans.
She knows about how to fix our economy, because that's what we
it's not just, no, you know, if we had any single person who knew how to fix the economy, we would defer to that person to fix the economy for us. We have people who have bits of knowledge about how to fix the economy. Even if she was, at one point, I was in a group where she participated, and we were discussing the economy. And then she rose her hand and said that, you know, electricity supply has a problem in the country. And that she can cite an example in her own place where she had problems getting electricity, and sometimes the ups and downs in the power fluctuations and all that. I mean, and you know, it featured in supply of power, featured very well in this communique. So it was a confirmation at that point of somebody who had a feeling, a direct impact on electricity supply and the effect of it.
Okay. You can move away from that.
But essentially, what is important is that we needed representation across the country. We got the representation. We didn't choose political parties who was to represent who was to be represented at the place. If MPP were, for example, eager to come and Nana decided to come himself, that was good for us. If he decided to send my in-law Asabi, that was good. So nobody should be faulted in who was represented.
So the invitation to the political parties was for one person representation?
That is not the case. They were given the chance to send some representation.
Oh, I see.
And I cannot be very specific how many people were to be represented.
That's fine.
But I definitely knew that, know that it's not just one person.
Right.
Because political parties are too big and too varied in their perspectives that you should expect just one person to be representing them. But essentially, there was good representation.
Okay.
The discussions were frank.
Right.
There was commitment and there was enthusiasm, and I was impressed by the fact that people were willing to sacrifice. They even sometimes refused to go for lunch at the time lunch was ready, and we moved beyond 2 o'clock.
Okay.
And at night, after supper, after dinner, people sat until 11 p.m.
Right.
I mean, that showed how people were committed. That in the question, in questions about how to drive this nation to success, Ghanaians in all walks of life will be willing to sacrifice and get themselves committed into seeing that we reach a certain goal. And I give kudos to all the people who attended, and it shows that Ghanaians are willing to go the extra length if given the right atmosphere.
The Vice President was also in residence for the 3 days?
He stayed in residence throughout, and in the evenings, late after dinner, he'll come back, he sit down, people are sitting around him.
The governor of the Bank of Ghana
and he was conversing. He sat there, Paul Akwa was there, he did the same. They all stayed throughout, you know. I mean, I was very much impressed with what I saw.
Okay.
Everybody wore their T-shirts. People came down after the program to have informal conversations, and that was good. You know, we break the ice between people when we allow them to go into our lives and to question us beyond the office and beyond the...
Tell us a bit, give us a bit of insight into the structure of the discussions. All the 140, participants, you sat in one hall and did the discussion, or as we understand, you broke into various sections and discussed various thematic areas. How was it done?
Well, first of all, there was the opening in which the Vice President and the President addressed us, and there were two presentations, key presentations from somebody from the African Development Bank, and Dr. Mako also made a presentation, very learned presentations. And right after those presentations, there were other presentations, after which there was a break. And then that was the first day.
Right.
Then on the second day, we went into discussion groups. And in the discussion, and we did the discussion groups for 2 days. After that, positions were compiled and represented to the plenary. And then people had their inputs, and after that.
So the groups, what I want to understand is, did you have a group that was paying attention to transportation, a group paying attention to energy, a group paying attention to agriculture, or what?
Yeah, for example, there was a group that was committed to private sector growth. There was a group committed to macroeconomic stability. There was a group committed to infrastructure. There was a group committed to economic management, and et cetera, et cetera. So,
and were the people who belong to this group selected because of their backgrounds, or just a random?
Of course, their expertise. If, for example, you are talking about economic management, it was chaired by Mr. Kwame Pianim, and you had some other people who had managed the economy before, were part of it.
Professor Kwesiboche and Co.
And Professor Kwesiboche chaired the macroeconomic stability, because he had that background, very, very, very astute gentleman in his own class, who knew what he was about, or who always knows what he's about. He chaired that group with the former ministers of economics, the Minister of Economics, and other people who had done something on the economics in Ghana's economy, who were also there. And so there were people who knew what they were about, who had specialized knowledge in the areas, and who informed the group about what exactly was happening.
Okay.
And for example, the private sector, you have the AGI, and you have all the other groups that were there. You have key individuals who are into the private sector, managing directors of banks, and other people who were part of it.
Interesting. Thank you very much. Now, Asabi, tell me, you obviously observed from afar, because you stated your position from the very word go that you are not attending. Number one, the invitation got to the NPP late. There were no, as it were, documents attached to it to help you, a base document to help you make an informed decision as to what exactly you are going to look at. And again, critically, that the government had already submitted a document to the IMF stating its homegrown position to addressing the economic problems between 2014 and 2017. So you said that was going to be a cosmetic exercise. Observing from afar, don't you feel that you misstate something?
Well, thank you, Samson, and thank you to my viewers and also listeners. The economic forum just ended in Akosombo or Tsenche. To me, was something that was not necessary at this time. And the party's position has been articulated by the party chairman. Personally, I heard about this thing about a month ago from, I think, the vice president called for it. Before then, I had even asked that something must be done, and indeed, I questioned why we were in a mess economically, and the NDC as a government had capable people. I know. I mean, when he was talking about who was there, I was asking, where's Kampipra? Where is Dufour? Where is Pio Gabra? Where is Moses Asaga?
He was there.
Well, they might have been there, but you didn't mention. That's why I say, if they are there, why are they in positions they can turn this economy around? We've seen them before. So, yes.
In respect of Dr. Dufour, we understand that he was not
No, I'm saying he mentioned Moses Saga, and I said he was there.
Yeah,
Right.
but we're talking about
Yes. I have information that Dufo had traveled at the time the invitations were sent out, and he made effort and sent his assistant to go and pick it for him. But
Okay.
yeah.
The point I'm trying to make is that the whole idea was not thought through. And so suddenly you couldn't get hold of people, and even a political party by the MPP, you couldn't get us in there. Compare that to what we did when we were in government, 2001. We were not in a crisis then. We had just assumed authority to run the affairs of the nation. We came to meet a document called Vision 2020. And I believe, and I know there was a 1997 economic forum, similar one in Carolina. And so we took that paper and decided as a new government, we should be looking forward, and there must be a vision. So there was a document, we took it, and we began to put our own party manifesto, which called for a golden age of business into it. And so we thought, let's call a dialogue, not a forum. There's a difference. A forum is a marketplace. A forum is an assembly point. It derives its meaning from the Greek time, where when people finish eating and they are comfortable, they move into the market square, sit in there, and talk about anything that's happening in the city. And nobody takes it forward beyond that point. That's a forum. It's a one-off thing. And indeed, that's what we realized. So we turned it into a dialogue. That's the difference. In fact, most people confuse a dialogue and a forum. And that's where I fought my colleagues in the NDC. They've consistently insisted on a forum in Carolina. And this time a forum again, meaning they won't take it further. Our dialogue, indeed, because it's a dialogue and it's meant to achieve an agreement and to move on, had an institution of state, a constitutional body called the National Development Planning Commission, as the one that had the authority to discuss it. And indeed, at that time when I was the coordinator, I was not a minister. So we took the politics out of it, gave it to the NDPC. At that time, Dr. Pakwe Shindom, who was the Minister for Economic Planning and Regional Integration, then was the overall boss. We worked under him, me and Jambafo, he wasn't a minister then, Angela Farhat, One Asante. We put things together. And that's when we developed the Ghana Shared Growth and Development Agenda, if you remember. The GPRS documents and all that. So it was looking forward. In their case, it's a crisis moment. Indeed, for 5 years, they've sat through the economy. They were voted into government to go and solve a problem. And so you have the responsibility. But if you chop the meat to the bone, 2012 you've overspent. In fact, 2010, 2011, 2012 was even worse. 4.8 billion was spent. And then you come and tell us that we should come in and help you. Fine, if that is your beef, then why don't you give us some room to prepare, and then we come and help you? In any case, when the help comes and you benefit, it's you. It doesn't come. They were not voted into government to go and form a union government. That's not what they were voted to. They were supposed to go and solve a problem. And you, from 5 years, have already spent some money which you were not expected to. So if you want us to come in, calm down. Talk to us nicely. Your tone must change. I mean, I can't handle it. Yeah, can I come? I got that mumra. And we will do it. But not when you say, oh, just leave them alone. That's their nature. That's well, if that's our nature, excuse me, this is not union government, then solve it. So that's the thing. In our time, before the dialogue happened, when you asked me to come, I was in Volta region, so I haven't got some of my documents ready. But if you go on the net, you'll find, I was trying to locate it, I couldn't find it. But we had started the process from February when we entered government. Indeed, Mrs. Grace Coleman from the finance ministry was one of the key architects, and she was a deputy minister designate. So she had not even been approved. So which tells you that we had not caused any mess. We took something and we're going to move with it. And we kept on saying that let's start a process. And before the dialogue, which was May 14th and 15th of 2001, we had done some consultation with all stakeholders to prepare the base document, what was supposed to be the agenda for the dialogue. And when we finished the dialogue, how do we go forward? So there were timelines as to what we do in August, what chief directors are supposed to do. Because in the end, you pick a piece of paper. My brother here is a politician. He will give the document to his chief director and the team, and maybe some experts. How they do it, they have got no idea at Senchi. How do they move it forward? So we had prepared, and Dr. Paco Ezinome insisted that we should get all these people to be part of the agenda setting before we end up at...
Those are supposed to be your preliminary comments on the organization of the project itself.
It took some time, so I thought...
We'll come to you. No.
And then he said, well-meaning Ghanaians, I thought that was below the belt. We are well-meaning.
But that too are well.
I gave him some time because he had the benefit of being at the place, and I had questions that I thought was in the best position to respond to. Now, Nana, I don't know what you also think. The PPP was invited, you were represented.
The PPP is not against seeking consensus on the economy. Indeed, we received an invitation for one person, the chairman. Our chairman is presently out of the country. So we sent a rep, Samuel Ampa, part of our economic team, to participate.
So that is information to Mr. Pelford that the invitation to the parties was for one representation.
Yes, the chairman or one person, maybe to the PPP. I can't speak for any other party.
I've heard about other parties, they say one.
Now, the situation is obviously bad, the economy is bad. NDC has done a terrible job of management of the economy thus far. All the important indicators, inflation, business confidence, the value of the cedi against the currency, unemployment, are all moving in the wrong direction. It is obvious that the Mahama administration needs help. So we think that this forum is a move in the right direction, and that participation of the PPP in this particular platform is something that we support. Now, unfortunately, Dr. Indum was invited only to the first day ceremony, but not to the entire program. We would have wished that, as a person who have had history in government, in the private sector, we would have been invited to give a paper of a sort, and he would have definitely been there to offer his inputs. He also had to travel outside the country to Liberia and other business issues, so he was not around. But I would like to say that in 2001-2002, Dr. Indum, as the Minister of Economic and Regional Cooperation and the Chairman of the NDPC, organized this particular forum. And rightfully so, as Asabi has said, it is about the preparation towards the forum or the dialogue. You have to give ample time to inform stakeholders about what is it that you are achieving, what you're looking for, and to be able to have those people buy into the idea, because you see, you cannot do any meaningful activity unless the participants buy into the idea of what is it that you're trying to do. And we believe that that broad consultation did not take place, and that must be looked at as we go forward in the future.
Are you saying the only point at which you were contacted was the letter that was sent to you to come to send a representation?
Precisely so. And that was a week before the program. Precisely so. We had no prior consultation. We had no prior knowledge. It was a week before the program.
But you followed it. You say you endorse it. In principle, it's good. Because the times in which we are require that you bring all on board.
We are in very difficult times. We have a leadership crisis. We have problems in the system. Now, we don't blame the NPP for what they said they will not do. You know, the NDC has been ruthlessly attacking everyone who has been critical of the way the economy has been handled. And this one is why people believe that there is some suspicion and a smacks of some bad faith and suspicion. But in the same token, we also believe that people like Osafo Maf, former Minister of Finance, should have participated, given the opportunity to participate, and the wealth of knowledge that he has gained of what works and what does not work should have been brought to bear on this particular gathering, so that we'll be able to have Mother Ghana benefiting from the knowledge of our citizens.
He was invited. He chose to, subscribe to, or as it were,
the party's position,
succumb to the party's whip.
Yes, and that is what we are saying is unfortunate in some of this process. We are saying that there needs to be an alternative to the policies that is happening. And the alternative has to do with a non-partisan approach to governance. If you, Dr. Amwako's opening statement and the research that they have done, transformation is 30 to 40 years. Transformation does not happen within
20 to
30 years. The transformation does not happen within a vacuum of 3 to 4 years. Because politicians are thinking about re-election. They are thinking about their lifespan. And every document that has been brought out of any economic dialogue talks about consistency in approach to policy making and continuation of policies of predecessors.
We'll deal with the points. We'll deal with the points in detail.
Yeah, I just wanted to just land with this, that there needs to be an alternative to the way politics has been run in this country by both the NPP and the NDC. That the lack of continuation talks about a dogfight between two people. But it is about the nation's interest at heart. And people put you there to work in lieu the benefit of the citizens.
Okay.
So you cannot see good policies, and because you're talking about political expediency, you cut them aside.
Okay. Abdul Malik, let's hear you on the processes towards the organization and following throughout what you make of it. We'll get into the details, and I'm sure some of you are ready with the previous documents to make comparisons. Of course, some of the points that have been enumerated in the 22-point consensus, you find some of them as a repetition of the old. But what do you say about the whole thing?
Well, I am sure about a week ago on this program and 2 days before then on the Metro TV Good Morning Ghana program, I declared my support for this full principle and indicated that there were precedents to that effect. And if those previous ones I gave support to, I didn't see my way clear in disagreeing with yet another foe, or whatever it was worth. So I think it was a good idea. I think it was necessary. Circumstances that determined why this should be held are there. Asabi made a point about the NPP administration, that the NPP 1 administration in 2001 was not challenged or was not confronted with any crisis. I'm not too sure. There was crisis. There was a challenge. I'm not being heard.
Not one we ourselves caused.
But exactly the point I was going to make.
But they caused it. They could have solved it themselves.
Preempting me. That's exactly what I was going to say. That it wasn't self-inflicted.
Okay.
There was
right, Kuku, sorry, I understand that we have some technical problems with your microphone. We can't hear you clearly. So just hold on. Okay. We'll come to you and deal with that. Now, I wanted us to look at the points. And Mr. Purple, the points. Point 1, for example, that the directive principles of state policy, that's chapter 6 of the 1992 Constitution, must continue to guide the national development effort anchored in a long-term national development framework with a compelling vision. What's that? What's your understanding of this being a part of the consensus?
You see, we are talking about building consensus around issues about development, showing understanding about Ghana's development path, and getting people to buy into it. But there's a framework to it. There's a constitutional provision, a whole chapter that talks about our development framework and outlines, and which all governments, all people of Ghana who share in the governance of this country, especially the economic governance, must adhere to. Even though there is no binding, legal binding effect to it, it's still important that we recognize the directive principle of state policy as a guide, and which we have made reference to, and say that we understand what the directive principle of state policy is directing us, and we are building our consensus around those directives.
According to our courts, our Supreme Court, it's not absolute that the directive principles of state policy are not justiciable, as so to say that if you breach them or you do not implement them, it's not binding. According to our courts, there are certain situations where you can be held to account.
Okay, that's good. But I'm talking about the general principle about it, but the Supreme Court understanding of it goes beyond just the ordinary implication of it.
Right.
And I do acknowledge that. So essentially, you know, it is to bring an anchor so that Ghanaians can see the reason why we are looking for consensus. That there is a legal framework about it, there's a constitutionality about it, there is a need for us to do what we have done or what we did, and that if Ghanaians are called upon to do so, it is within the remits of our laws.
When I ask, I'm asking, like, sorry if I ask rudely, what's the point? The directive principles of state policy, that's in the Constitution. That's the supreme law of this country. Our presidents vow to defend and implement it. You know, so if we are not sticking to that, why are we thinking that a non-binding Senchi consensus should rather be looked at from a perspective that should guide what we do?
You know, this is we need to think beyond what we are just saying. We all know about what the economy is. We all have answers to how it is approached. The directive principle itself has made references to equity in development, you know, economic issues that should touch the lives of everybody, justice, and etc., etc. But it is important that in the nitty-gritty of implementation and the areas of priorities that should be tackled, we reach a consensus about them. And it's important for us to know that what we are doing is not to sidestep the law or to sidestep the issues that are already binding us. And that's why the reference is made to it. So essentially, what we have gone there to do is to endorse our Ghanaian determination to go beyond political party behavior, or to go beyond our self-serving interests and collapse our interests into single united approach to advancing the cause of development in Ghana. And it's important for us, you know, for all Ghanaians. And that's why I was very impressed with the number of people who came out. I was misunderstood by Asabi when he said that I said well-meaning Ghanaians. You see, sometimes you give us the feeling that when I refer to some other people as well-meaning Ghanaians, and once MPP was not there, then there are no well-meaning Ghanaians. That's wrong. Everybody with a certain caliber of knowledge, understanding, determination to build this country can be described as a well-meaning Ghanaian.
Right. So the essential point is that the 22 points consensus,
yeah,
some find them to be a repetition of things that we already know, solutions that have been advanced by various economists and commentators of the economy already. So we are well aware of them. When you mention, for example, point 4, that there's a need to foster a state whose day-to-day management is supported by a professionally competent civil service working in an environment devoid of political victimization and intimidation, where support for government is not interpreted as political affiliation. Someone will ask you, this is taken care of. We know that the civil service has a code of conduct that's supposed to bind it. They know that it ought not to be, they ought to be efficient, they ought to be professional, competent in what they do, and they ought not to act as, you know, political people. So what's the point? You talk about point 5, that it is imperative to strengthen the public accounts and finance committees of parliament to play their oversight responsibilities. What don't we know about the Public Accounts Committee and the recommendations that we are already aware of to give it teeth to bite? It's simply a question of implementing what we already know. So why go to a conference 3 days and come and repeat the things we know to us?
I'm very surprised if anybody would think this way. First of all, let me just ask you, you are a lawyer. Whether MEDA is in our books or not, is it right or wrong?
It's wrong, obviously.
It's wrong. MEDA is wrong, but we put it in our laws. Why do we put it there? So we can all come to an understanding that this is what we want.
So when we have already put it there, when we have already put it there,
yes,
we don't call another meeting to put it there again.
No, we do. Where there's a MEDA, you go to court. You don't need to go to court if you think that the MEDA is a crime and somebody commits it. You just go and kill the person or do. You still go to court. I mean, what I just want to say is that knowledge about issues doesn't mean we understand the practice of it. You know, there's nothing under the sun that is not known on this earth, but people meet to discuss them. Women meet to talk about gender issues. Men meet to talk about gender issues. You don't think that we don't know what they're about. We know them. We know everything under the sun. But when we come to the point where we have to sit down and discuss them, it is to reach a certain level of consensus. It is to reach an understanding of it in how to proceed, and it's to give us guidelines in the implementation process, so that in the course of implementation, everybody is on board. Visions, for example, must be shared. If I say our vision is to make Ghana a better Ghana by creating conditions for people and creating a situation where we have maximum jobs creation, we have private sector moving forward, and we have school leavers getting jobs as soon as they finish. Now, who tells you people don't know that this is something that governments would do?
No, I'm talking about where the solutions have been proffered before and stopped in very direct ways to the government.
In different forums.
Take for example, point 13. The Bank of Ghana should expedite work on the assessment of the recently announced foreign exchange measures and take speedy and appropriate action to restore confidence and relieve the unintended consequences of the measures. We have heard,
Samson,
we have heard various individuals, economists, and so on, of course, including Dr. Bamia, say that these measures, these are the consequences, and that's not what you do. For example, 14, consideration should be given to the amendment of the Bank of Ghana Act to set a ceiling on its lending to government. We have heard about the Fiscal Responsibility Act and all of those things.
Samson, let me tell you something. You see, have you done research before? If you have done research and written a thesis, you would realize that every single point you made is taken from somewhere else, except the conclusions where the person now begins to reflect on what has happened. It doesn't mean that because they existed somewhere, you can bring them together to now make a meaning, a certain meaning. What you are now reading, the single issues you are now reading, is not the issue. The collected issues and the direction we are moving is what the issue is. The fact that on these issues which were existing in individual capacities are now collectively put together and have been given a certain tag. So when we sat there, we were looking about all these issues from different people and which were proffered or projected at different forums, now brought together, and the document has become a different thing altogether. So you cannot pick any single issue and say that it's a new issue. But you can pick the document and say that there is a new issue. The points you are reading, there are 1,001 others which haven't found their way here.
And these are only actually the summaries.
The summaries of exactly what we are going to do. The nitty-gritty is in the implementation process, which we are going to follow up on. And the cost elements, which are also going to be followed up on.
Okay, thank you. I can go
and
to
the personnel,
now. Right,
and the atmosphere, everything will now be put in shape.
I see.
You know.
Let me go to Kweku now. Kweku.
Yes, I am not too sure where to start from because I'm not sure if I was heard even from the beginning.
Yes, straight away, start from the bottom.
Yes, as I was indicating, I, in principle, supported this project because I did support the earlier ones, and I see absolutely nothing wrong with holding even further ones to interrogate issues. It's a matter of brainstorming,
right? And
sometimes new ideas can come. But as I indicated last week, in terms of our problems, I think we've identified them over and over again. Even in terms of prescriptions to resolve those problems too, and a lot of them are out there. I thought what had been missing was this quality of economic management, the lack of physical discipline, both of which then lead to the absence of sustainability. And so we keep recycling the problem. And I can understand, and that is why we have some amount of cynicism out there, skepticism to the effect that, look, this is a waste of national resources, it's a waste of time, we're doing the same thing over again. It's a legitimate concern. We have to appreciate that dosage of cynicism. And understand where they are coming from. Because truly, if we decide to go into the details, you will see, I have the 1997 document here, not just the recommendations, but the action plan.
Right.
It came with an action plan. The 2002-12, I have it here. It also came with action plan. And when you decide to do a certain analysis as to the level of implementation, you see that there's a huge deficit relative to the fulfillment of the targets that were set. And so why not? If people are cynical, we must appreciate it.
But it ought to be noted that whilst the previous ones have action plans, and this one also will have an action plan, this one, the difference, we are told, is that there's going to be a committee that will continue to ensure that it is implemented.
The other ones too they had oversight committees. This 2000, if you read President Kufuor's speech on 2002, he was making reference to an oversight committee that had been put in place.
So there's nothing different?
Yes, there's absolutely, in terms of the principles, in terms of the format. Indeed, the 1997 one, apart from the 407 people who attended and all the rest, they were broken subsequently into groups to go and thoroughly interrogate the issues. And each group had some projections that they made, analysis that they made, and recommendations, and then action plan was set up. You just have to go through it and find out that, look, while some were achieved, they were not even sustained. They were not sustained. So we came back with the dialogue, the first dialogue under Kufuor. We were virtually discussing the same old things again about the need to sustain macroeconomic stability and all the rest. As I was making the point, it's not as if the crisis that provoked or that led to the first dialogue was inflicted by the Kufuor government. But the Kufuor administration inherited a crisis-ridden economy, had declared epic, and so Ghana's economy was challenged. The party had its own manifesto, its own budget, that's even put in place an interim budget, I think somewhere in March. And yet, they decided that let's have this dialogue so that we can bring all groups together. You see, there's one, I'm not going to say it's a fallacy, but I get the impression that sometimes people look at the thing as if it's an all-party conference. The thing goes beyond political parties. Right. You have labor there, you have civil society there, you have businessmen, the business community, and so this goes beyond political parties. The impression I get is that in terms of engagement, pre-forum engagement, relative to the political parties, I think not much was done, or perhaps nothing at all was done. It appears that the political parties were seen, their representation was seen within the context of just come and attend the opening and closing session and get out from the place. It didn't make sense. Because the subcommittees that you had formed, you needed to have political party input as well. So that required some level of engagement with them pre-forum. I suspect that wasn't done properly.
But you agree with the president when he says the absence of the NPP was a tragedy?
I respect the NPP's position because of the reasons they've given, but I disagree with them. I think they still could have put in an appearance, even if as an observer status, under protest. I think they could have. Or they could still have gone. The NPP's human resource capacity is huge. It's very huge. They could easily have taken part in this forum and articulated an alternative view or point out the errors of judgment on the part of the system relative to the issues that were going to be discussed. So I disagree with them.
Kwame Beni defied and said this was a bad decision.
Well, I disagree. I think it was regrettable. But I respect the decision because, as I've said, the pre-forum engagement was so limited or even nil, completely absent. And that doesn't show some level of, respect as well as the readiness to actually build consensus. So when a political party based on those things takes that decision, it's difficult for me to condemn them, but I disagree with all due respect. I still think they were capable of going in there and articulate a stand and deal with the issues properly. But if they didn't do it, and I said, it's beyond parties. This whole project, I see it going beyond political parties.
Right.
If you look at the issues broadly. But one last point.
Yeah.
One last point about Madame Ekuya
Donko.
Yes, I'm not going to go out there and say because she's not, educated in terms of English language and the rest, she didn't have to be there. But I think she's also not doing much justice to the proceedings. Because I heard her on air, the contribution she claims she made, and interestingly, Pelpo says was to do with energy. Her view is that those who do generator business are in conspiracy with the electricity corporation people, and that it is them who tell the electricity people to put off the lights so that the generated business would go up. You see, this crudity does not help us to accept that here was somebody who contributed something useful to a project. It's difficult. So is that what she really said there? This kind of weird conspiracy theory is input into a serious program like a National Economic Forum or Dialogue. And to be honest with you, Asabi, I see no real difference between forum and dialogue. I think it's semantical.
It's not semantics.
It is semantical.
It is not semantics.
Because all you have to do is to look at the products. And if you look at the forum, which I have here, the 1997 forum, you go deep to the subcommittees that were put in place. And indeed, it was attended by Akufo-Addo, Apreku, Osafo Mafu, and Dr. Brobe, representing an NGO, not a political party. And each, if you go to the value-added tax, value-added tax was reintroduced in 1998. This 97 one forum dealt with it thoroughly. Apreku was a member. They came out with some projections that there should be some fulfillment of conditions precedent before VAT is reintroduced. Go and check the parliamentary Hansard and see how the debate went. It was based on this forum report. So you see, when you remove the whole thing from the large assembly of people who go, speeches are made by the president, by Minister of Finance and all the rest, and check the subcommittees and the kind of discussions that went on, you will see some merit. I am thinking that because right now we are only looking at the summary, this whole discussion suffers a certain deficit.
That's correct.
When we get those full complement and those things, we can then understand perhaps the spirit that drove quite a lot of the discussions that resulted in the 22-point communique.
Right. What's the point?
I just want to say that when you look at the directive principle of state policy, the PPP has continuously drummed home this point, and indeed, we have put in, we are seeking interpretation at the High Court. There is a general...
Over the FQ.
There is a general disrespect for the implementation of the directive principle of state policy. And leadership has been bankrupt in that particular area. And you see, that is part of the process that we are in a crisis now. There seems to be a leadership gap.
Okay, you're going to have your take, so hold on. You're going to have your substantive point. Now, Asabi, tell me, this we're told, like Nana mentioned earlier, that Dr. Amwako had said that development, of course, will have to take between 20 and 30 years. We know that what will now become of the document will be that this will be a national document. It will be as a party. The expectation of Ghanaians, legitimately, will be that if you have the opportunity to get into government in 2016, you will follow this. Because if you abandon it, we have thrown our money to waste.
Thank you. It's a fact that you cannot have a country being run on a short-term basis. You can't. And you can't have a country where politicians come and they think that we should solve all problems in a 1 term or 2 terms. It's not possible. Indeed, that's why there's a difference between the forum and the dialogue. Koiku might want to play it as semantics. It's not semantics.
He says the product is the same.
It is not. We identified National Development Planning Commission, and that's a constitutional body that did everything. Committees and committees.
With the 97 one. It was organized by the National Development Planning Commission.
Fine, but
and indeed, in the
let me
action
finish
plan,
my
no,
point.
that's the point. No, please.
I'll come
the
to the.
action
I kept
plan,
quiet. Let me finish my point.
Implementation agencies, NDPC was the lead agency in many of the areas.
Okay.
That is check the records.
That did not take place at this particular time because this particular forum should have followed suit. You see, that is why if you don't know your past,
so where's my point of discussion?
The NDC was
hold on, allow Asabi to make his point.
Asabi, sorry.
Allow him to make his substantive point.
That's one of the reasons why I'm not here most of the time.
That's
incorrect.
It's maybe unfair, but you don't have enough time.
It's inaccurate. Go on. It's inaccurate, yeah.
And I still insist. Kweku refers to 1997 where NDPC, yes. But we are talking about this forum, this 2014 forum. Why was no institution of state like NDPC mandated to do this job? So let's not go back. It's true. There has been precedences. But right now, I am still insisting that it's a forum that probably does not intend to go anywhere. But of course, Dr. Mwako says we should look at 30 to 40 years, which is a fact. Indeed, when we came in, we took the Vision 2020 for the dialogue. That was the basis of it. In fact, we had missed all the targets, inflation targets, interest rate targets. So I remember Dr. Parkwes, when he assembled us together to go and look at this, and then which developed into the Ghana poverty strategy document, we were looking at the future, which would go beyond the MPP if we were not around. So we all believe that. But this one, I don't believe. But let me go back to another point. Especially when party says that directive of principles of state policy. The question is, NDC came with their own manifesto. Every party comes with a manifesto. So what? This dialogue forum thing supersedes our manifesto? No. What it means is that we must fuse it together. And I don't see where the NDC fuses their manifesto to this. So what? They have abandoned their manifesto to do what? Universities per every region? Or they have abandoned. So there must be a fusion. Indeed, our time, we fuse the golden age of business. And that tells you that, yes, we looked at the vision, but we as a party must also take a responsibility by our own manifesto. So the question is, it must be balanced. Now, let me move to another point. I also said, and it's true, that this thing was not necessary. Indeed, Kweku admits that the problems are known. Everybody knows this problem. In fact, if you look at the recommendation, it's almost like a repetition. I would have expected that going into Senche or wherever with the cost element, or couldn't we have looked at implementation of all the policies that are available in Ghana? All the policies are there. Look, you go to General Champon, you know what they call it. In their scattered form. But we have already put some of them together. You know,
but Pepper was saying that
they are not scattered. There's some scattered
together.
But our economic dialogue brought them together into the Ghana National, Ghana Shared and Growth and Development Agenda. Poverty reduction. It came together. That's what came to. That was our medium-term development plan. And then there was the Vision 2020, which was the long term. So there was something together. So it's not true that it's all scattered. The point I am making is that when we came in, there were problems that were inherited. We did not create it ourselves. And indeed, we thought, hey, hang on a minute, going forward with Vision 2020, let's all come together and do this together. In their particular instance, as a political party that had been given responsibility to run the state, 2009 coming, they have been overspending. They have been taking money, and we'll come to Shuba soon. The basket is leaking. Everything is going away. And you are going to what? Come and tell us that we should plan a policy and then you take the money away somewhere. So we need to look at how can we implement the policies that are there. Rather than go and put a new program together and then it's a repetition anyway. And we thought, hey.
Are you not satisfied that portions of this will be fused into the budget like you are saying? There are very clear instructions to the Minister of Finance, for example.
The Minister of Finance is told. Yeah. The Minister of Finance is told under the Financial Administration Act, it's 244. It says the minister may cause the inspection of books, records, and offices of a department. That's one simple example. And it's there. It's an act. Is the minister causing the inspection of those books? Otherwise, where will Suba be given? So we come to that. But the point I'm making is that the laws are there. So whatever it is, the minister must look at it and work with it. And they are in government. They must be working with it. If you can't work with it...
I was pointing that to you because you suggested as though this should have preceded the budget. And the fact that it did not meant that it could have been a waste. Point 12, they say that further efforts must be made to improve the efficiency of tax collection, as well as broadening the tax base and reduce recourse to the introduction of new taxes. The incidence of discretionary tax exemptions should be reviewed and reduced. There are portions, stuff like this.
But there are another portion where it talks about reviewing the budget. Meaning that the budget's targets have been missed anyway. So this document that we are working on, the budget, we have to go back and look at it, which Dr. Kuto said already pointed out to the NDC. That look at the budget that you yourself presented. You've missed a target, the CD is gone way high. So I'm just saying that what the NDC just did is they have caused some problems already. It is not problems they inherited. They caused it for 5 years. If you are going to resolve it, then you need to find a way to get people together in a sober way. Indeed, Kweku talks about we should have participated and articulated our view. Indeed, we would have gone there. Where was our view going to be articulated to the Ghanaian public? In the communique, then they said the MPP said A, B, C, D. It won't come out. And secondly, you wouldn't have the opportunity as an MPP there, because that is not, the forum is not for you. It's for all of us. So if you think that you didn't have enough preparation, and in any case you think that, look, all these things are gimmicky, and in fact they are going to sack workers, which we believe that the document that they sent to the IMF is part of the retrenchment and the downsizing. So if that is the case, why should the party go into such a discussion and begin to buy into it? The next time you are cornered with it. Yes, we need to solve the problem together, but they caused the problem. So if you cause the problem and you want us to come and help you, then be fair to all of us. Give us space, give us time, and let us acknowledge that this is a problem we need to, and look forward as a country with a vision. And there's no vision which was given to us before we went there. That's my point I'm making.
Now, there are those who suggest, the president said this is a tragedy, their non-participation. There are those who suggest that the NPP did not participate and didn't see reason to participate because they are men like Dr. Baumia and co. have put forward solutions upon solutions. Sometimes they have been bastardized, they have been insulted by members of the government. And Baumia, for example, has been told that he doesn't have the competence requisite, required to fix the economy. So he should shut up, stop talking. Should that have informed their decision at all?
You see, in the Fourth Republic, we have seen a political ping pong. All the things that MPP is accusing NDC of, MPP did it to NDC. And that is why we need a freshness in thought and a freshness in the approach to national dialogue. You see, all the stuff that the communique that has been spoken about in fixing the economy is not something that sits in isolation somewhere. You need the components of the public service, the separation of powers to work to improve the economy. So when you talked about point 4 of the communique, I am asking myself, where is the Ministry of Public Sector Reform under the NDCF? You see, the NDC has relegated reform to the back burner because it views that there is nothing that should be done to improve the public service.
There's a minister of state in charge of.
Well, it's not a ministry. It's some sector brought somewhere. Well, that is the whole point. There has not been attention paid to it, and there has not been any substantive thing that has been done by that ministry to help us solve the problem. When you talk about building the economy, corruption is part of building the economy and the competence of the people in the public service. You cannot talk about pay administration without talking about competence in the public service. Between life and death, you must deal with the public service. When you are born, the public service must give you a birth certificate. When you die, you get a death certificate. When you want to do a business, you need a public service. When you want to engage in anything meaningful, it's the public service. So until you are able to run the public service well, you will continue to have the challenges that has plagued us in this Fourth Republic under both administrations. We are suggesting and advocating for a ministry of public service. And the purpose of that ministry, as it is done in other places, is to ensure that you continuously renew how the activities, the governing, the activities of the public service is guided. Because you see, until a chief director who signs documents worth millions of dollars is treated in a light better than a bank manager that does not even go up to that standard, we will continue to have these problems. Then training in the public service and the career path in the public service is important. That is why the pay reform, single salary, its implementation has been horrible. It has gone off the recommendations that was placed on paper for us to go by this, and we use the political expediency route. That is why nobody is seeing their way clear. You need a public service to be able to respond to the economic challenges that we have. So if you talk at point 4, talking about the civil service should be able to support and all, how will they support if you're not training them, if you're not giving them equipment? You know, when Dr. Amwa spoke, he said that out of a research of 21 countries, Ghana was the 20th from in the bottom in terms of the use of technology to be able to improve our ways. That is reflective of the public service. When antiquated typewriters are still being used to be able to do work, when documents, there's no email trail of documents that can be found, when people must pull things out of some drawers to be able to work. This is an ineffective and ill-equipped public sector, and you're looking for them to take us where? You're looking for them to take us where? You have not prepared them to do the future activities, but you are looking for them to do what? You need a ministry. You need leadership. We have a leadership crisis in this country right now. We are asking ourselves who is in charge.
Saying
who is in charge?
To
because
the
look,
outcome of the forum. Because the forum is saying...
I'm making it to the forum.
No, the forum is saying the things you are complaining about. The forum says fix them in this sustainable way.
Yeah, but the forum is not talking. The forum is not talking about a ministry of public service. There must be an establishment of a ministry.
You don't have the details
because,
yet. But you are saying, look at point 4. A ministry is a panacea.
Please look at point 4. Look at point 4. Look at point 13.
Point 4 a while ago.
1, 2, 3. They are all talking about activities of the public service. You cannot increase raising taxes when you have not dealt with the corruption matter, you have not dealt with the training, and you have not dealt with the systems that is put in place to be able to help us get to meet the targets and the rest. You see, until that is done, all the stuff that we are saying becomes just an exercise in futility. You understand me? Because
Kuku gave a caution.
Yes.
A very instructive one. And he says that these are only pointers. They are summaries.
If you have done that, if you have studied the historicity,
that don't give you the full details of what is supposed to happen. If you study the historicity
of the forums, you will know that the recommendations are similar. The recommendations are similar from 97, 2001, 2, and 3. And so if you look at the similarities, that is the historical antecedents, you'll be able to make some
my question is that I don't really get you, because what you are complaining about, they have provided solutions here. So what exactly is your point?
The implementation phase of it is about its implementation.
We haven't gotten to the implementation phase yet.
What I'm saying is it's already there. That's what I'm talking about. What happened to the Ministry of Public Sector Reform? The ministry existed, now has been made some sector sitting somewhere with no line budget to do anything, and they have not made any meaningful impact.
Why is that your emphasis? Is it because you work there?
No, because you see, you cannot talk about public service and not talk about how the public service will be governed.
You don't know the details of what they agreed.
No, whatever is agreed, what I'm saying, there's already a Ministry of Public Service that has been scrapped. Okay. Attention has not been paid to it, and it has been allowed to die. You see, you are living in a state of permissive cornucopianism, where we think that the government can do whatever they want. You can spend however you want without having any guidelines. And it is the permissive cornucopianism that has gotten us to where we are. And that is what I'm saying, it must be checked. They're talking about ceilings and all of that. It is a reflective of a system gone wrong, and it's a reflective of a system that does not seem to have a driver. Because you must have, the Constitution gives unbridled power to the executive. That unbridled power that is given to the executive gives already the mandate to the executive to be able to take action to get the economy forward.
What is your point, Nana? These are suggested solutions to the complaints that you have.
What I'm saying is that the suggested solutions, they are a part of that already exists. And if you look at how the government has already treated the Ministry of Public Sector Reform by neglecting it and throwing it to the back burner, it means that how will it be able to implement the things that it's talking about when it already has the mandate to do so? You don't need the forum to give you the mandate to do what already exists.
We'll get to more of the details of the National Economic Forum. Simon is writing from Wali Wali, and he says, Samson, instead of institutionalizing the National Economic Forum, I suggest that Parliament, which is the true representation of the people of Ghana, should take up this task of rolling out an independent economic policy for our dear country and not an economic forum. Well, some will say to you that that's what the NDPC is supposed to do. So what exactly are we doing? Asanko Santa Maria writes, NPP has been making noise all over the place, claiming they have answers to the economic problems. They are now telling us they needed more time to prepare before attending an economic forum. That's your question. Akoto Razak in Tamale says the NPP boycotted the National Economic Forum because of their failure to solve the nation's problems. Osei in Brekum writes, government should put into immediate effect the recommendation that government borrowing should not exceed 10% of national revenue for the previous year. This will be a sign of government's commitment to the Senchi Consensus. PP Abraham, right from Saboba, says the dichotomy between forum and dialogue given by Mr. Asamoah Boateng is inaccurate. From Collins, Co-Build Advanced Learners Dictionary, forum is a place, situation, or group in which people exchange ideas and discuss issues.
So what's the deal?
Muhammad,
marketplace.
Muhammad Agoma, right from Teshima, says something. People compare Ghana to Uton bars, but I compare same to a train which has a brick van at the tail end. All right, those in Ghana's brick van are powerful. The economic situation now started after the overthrow of President Nkrumah. I and the NPP did cosmetic.
NDC won and.
Okay, NDC won and the NPP did cosmetic dressing. Late President Mills and now President Mahama waded into the real protracted economic damage. Now that okay, that's enough. Let's move on. That's too long a message there. Thank you, Ms. Asabi. There are those who say that the president says that this is a tragedy that you did not participate. Some say this is political suicide that you are committing because, look, it will be used against you.
Indeed, that is the whole trick. And that's what we believe they did. That's why they didn't give us room and time.
So if you're aware, why don't you
hang on a minute. As I pointed out earlier on, that when we did the dialogue, we did preparatory period. We had people to discuss even the agenda, so that when they came in, they have an idea. They don't do that. Then they sneak in a letter on Friday, come on Monday, no preparation. In the meantime, they go and talk to one of our key members, Yaosafo Mafo. He agrees to go. So you see the division they're creating. And then we hear them, Ethiopia. Yeah, we've heard Ethiopia. They're playing the music loud and clear.
No, but why? There were those of you also who said, let's look at it this way. Dr. Bawumia cannot be avoided. He was avoided. He was not invited.
So why was Dr. Bawumia not invited? Why was Dr. Bawumia? Everybody knows that.
But after all, you won't attend.
But the fact that they did not even bother to call him, and they did not even give us notice, and they put a wedge between us and one of our members. So look, it's like I put it this way. The NDC haven't chopped all the meat and the bone is now gone. They want to, they want to catch a snake. Yet they want to hold our hands to go and catch the snake. And then their hands is at the top end. Then the NPP hands should go and catch the snake. We won't. And let me tell you, it's like they've taken the bird, they plucked all the feathers and they want us to come and name the bird. What bird is it? Is it Achinchina or Achimprus? We don't know. So listen, the point I'm making is that, you see, when we go for an election, Ghanaians are given a stark choice. a stark choice of an MPP policy. This is the way we think we can run it. And this is not, we're not going to articulate how competent we are in running the economy at a function, at a forum. We've run the country for 8 years before. Everybody saw how President Kufuor and the team performed. No. And so we have the competent, our pedigree is known. So the century thing, if whether we go or not, doesn't mean anything. So you can't come and pluck the feathers of the bird and tell us what type of bird is it at Sinji. When you know us already.
Mr. Paul, talk about the politics of it as he's responding to
it.
The thing is that
they let them go and handle it.
They are saying, for example, the fact that you did not even see it proper to invite Dr. Bawumia shows that you didn't really want them to be there.
Actually, I do agree with the President, His Excellency John Mahama. It's a real tragedy. Even from what I'm hearing now, the effusions from the MPP about why they are not attending. We have chopped the thing to our bone, so we won't come and help you. You know, in the first place, there's a misconception about chopping to the bone. Who brought the single spine salary scheme?
That's bad, eh?
We are implementing it. They proposed it at the very edge when they were leaving government.
You see, the citizens.
We decided to implement it. It's causing us problems. Everybody knows that in Ghana, that what they have proposed, knowing what it was, is hurting us now.
You stopped the implementation for 1 year.
At one point, we spent 70%, close to 69.9% of our total revenue to pay single spine.
No.
We paid the two alone, single spine and interest on loans alone, took over 80% of our total revenue.
No.
So you ask questions. What are we going to do? Even now, single spine and loan interest, which is accumulated,
we're about that debate over and again here. The question he asked is, what went into the decision not to invite someone like Bawumia?
So I'm setting the standards, you know, because he said that we run down the economy. And I want to tell him it is not true that there's any economy that is run. Nobody has run down the economy. We have gotten to a point in our lives where we are challenged by the very decisions we have taken together, a combined decisions we have taken together.
We're not part
the
of the
loan
decision.
Interest we take, we pay 25%
well, you didn't hear Jerry Rawlings, he said that you are the problem. So
yeah,
you should rather.
And then we should have been
there.
The
problem.
Yeah. We should have been there in the meeting where Jerry Rawlings tells us that Kufuor was a problem, and then we go and sit in there.
Which meeting? Jerry didn't speak at any forum.
Well, he commented on the.
But you two have the right to comment. You are even commenting now. So Jerry is perfectly.
And you support Jerry Rawlings?
What it is that he is a statesman who has a right to comment, and he should be given the right anytime he comments.
No, I'm asking that you, knowing the facts that you know,
that
the
what
reason,
did he say?
What has brought the economy to where it is? You think
You
think that Jerry Rawlings was right?
They are 60% to blame, MPP.
They are 60%.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's why I wouldn't you be.
And I agree with Jerry. You know. So what I'm saying is that there's a need for them. There was the need for them to be part of it. They analyzed the single spine, knew that it was good, so they recommended it. So we implemented it, and we are having problems with it. It's chopping away all the revenue.
You were happy when you were paying the police?
Beyond this, he's talking about the invitation of Bawumia. Why didn't we invite him? I would have wished that Bawumia was elected by the MPP to come. He didn't come. MPP didn't come. Bawumia showed close understanding of our economy. He gave long criticisms of our economy. He demonstrated that he's somebody who can do something about the economy. On the assumption that it is true, let's agree with him. It was important for him to have come for this, because most of the things he said...
Was important for who to have come?
Bawumia.
Oh, you didn't
invite him?
I'm coming. It was important for him to... Most of the things he suggested were mainly to criticize, but not mainly to give solutions. So now there was a forum, and let me now respond to his question.
That's not exactly fair to him. If you take, for example, his very last statement that on the economy.
I said off air that would have even created more problems for the public of Ghana than the problems NDC is creating, MPP is creating for all of us.
I don't understand that.
Yes. When we invited Osafo Maafo, he said that we're creating, I noted it, that he said we are creating a wedge between them, taking some of their senior members and inviting them and leaving the party. You know, so in the first place, their thinking is that when we invited Osafo Maafo, it was wrong. We shouldn't have, because we are creating a wedge between them. Now, what about if we had invited Bawumia? What would have been the suggestion? There would have been a greater hue and cry. So there was an opportunity for them, despite everything, that you don't need 1 month, 2 months, 1 week to prepare. You have a play, you have chart an economic policy direction. You have shown understanding of the economy. Come and demonstrate your understanding in bringing to bear your knowledge in solving the challenge we are having today. They refused. They failed to make it. They excluded themselves from history.
Dr. Emmanuel Akwete of IDEC says that you didn't do well in the consultative process, and that even after Senchi, you still will need to push forward the consensus process because it comes down to NDC MPP. When it comes to implementation, it's political will.
You know, the president said that this whole thing we presented to the IMF is work in progress. You know, there's no one-time solution to any problem, and developing consensus is not an event. What we did was to create a forum for dialogue to happen. And he was confused about the definition of dialogue and forum.
Don't go there.
It's not something you need to define.
Bring the dictionary.
This thing that, no, don't worry about the dictionary.
So what are you trying to confuse?
Where we are sitting now, where we are sitting now, is a forum. What we are doing now
is a forum.
Is dialoguing. You know, so you create a forum before you can dialogue. So if you create a forum and people are there to talk, and you now call what they are talking about as a forum, it's the condition that is called a forum. The inner discussions is the dialogue. So you should understand that. But let me go.
It's to reach an agreement. That's a dialogue. To reach an agreement that is implemented.
We want to go to what? We need to.
If we want to go to English language, let's start English discussion.
Tell me, you wanted to go to which point?
The conclusion statement about the fact that we didn't invite Baumia. I'm thinking that it's a caveat. It's a place for they are just trying to escape the blame by Ghanaians. And I don't think that they can't. I don't think they can easily escape that.
Just a brief one from you on this point. Point 15, for example, where you are told, the government is being told to have an investment program to deal with energy crisis that must be put in place as a matter of urgency in order to propel growth, employment, competitiveness, and microeconomic stability. The NDC has its own manifesto. You talk about energy for all. What's going to be the difference? What's your understanding?
Manifesto of this.
I told you that this was NDC. Now, different political parties, different kinds of people from different backgrounds were brought together. Now, it's no longer an NDC perspective. It's now a national perspective.
Oh, interesting.
Actually, that's the essence of it all. That what we already know in our individual capacities can now be seen as a collective
What
approach.
I'm asking is the Energy for All program by the NDC.
Yes.
How different will that be from this one, which is asking for an investment program in the energy
it is. Let me give you the two scenarios, the difference. You know, NDC has a policy, a manifesto that says that we should make sure we reach out to every nooks and crannies of this country and provide them energy. It's
supposed to be 2016, right?
And then we've been able, we are second in the whole of Africa in the provision of energy access, access to electricity. We have about close to 77% now access.
The president talks about it a lot.
Yes. Now, that is the essence. That is the essence of our manifesto, that we reach out to as many people as possible. What we are seeing here is to increase the capacity to generate and to distribute, so that we can reach that objective. That any other government that comes in can always reach that objective, because you need to have
Then this manifesto doesn't cater for that.
No. It does, because I mean, it presupposes that if you want to reach out to as many people, you should have the pot, which should contain the capacity you need.
Right.
We, for example, John, His Excellency is talking about reaching to 5,000 capacity, megawatts capacity by 2016.
Right.
And we are working towards it, so that we can distribute to have been, and even supply to other countries.
So Nana, there are those who say, look, obviously, like the president himself admitted, that some of the recommendations are work in progress. They are already taking care of some of these situations. What do you expect in the implementation phase? Some of them, they are in sync with the NDC's manifesto already. The problem may come up with the NPP. For example, if they had the opportunity to They are working towards getting power in 2016. If they had the opportunity, it does appear that they may abandon it if the consensus process does not continue.
Yes. If NPP comes in power and they call a national dialogue, who do they expect to come? And this is the problem that I continue to have with this political ping pong that is going on, and Ghanaians are suffering.
Don't use a new word. Just stick to our local ordinary vocabulary.
Political table tennis.
What's your expectation of the other implementation phase?
My expectation at the implementation phase, my hope, you know, there's the hope versus what I think might happen. My hope is that we all put our shoulders to the wheel and we move as quickly as we can, because the Ghanaian is suffering. The Ghanaian is in a state that is struggling to pay his school fees.
The implementation phase, the question normally hinges on sustainability.
Here we are, as we move on to our program. There has been so many instances of malpractice by government officials. And this malpractice has not been dealt with in an expedient manner. No heads are rolling. People are doing communication gimmicks, and we are dealing with this situation continuously. I think the urgency, the fierce urgency of now is not there, and that we need to be able to do things in a way that will work to the benefit of the citizen. Look, when we talk about the implementation of some of these things, they are long-term in nature. Correct. And I appreciate that it is long-term in nature. The biggest problem that I have is when we began to experience these difficulties 2-3 months ago, the governor of the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Wampa, came out and he stated some of the things that needed to be done along with others that will help us go through this crisis. He talked about fiscal expenditure being brought under control. He talked about widening the tax net. He talked about adding value to our exports. And all these things that he talked about are long-term in nature. The president came out and told us that the vice president is in charge of the economic recovery team and everything will be well. Economic management team, and everything will be well within 2-3 months. The minister for finance also came and said the same thing that the president has said. Now we are where we are. We are still where we are. Whenever there's a challenge that comes up as a nation, we expect leadership to come and say, look, Ghanaians, there is a challenge. We have a problem. But I am putting together these measures. Bear with me for a period of time. We will come out of this condition favorably. And so that you and I as citizens will play our role in ensuring that our beloved nation is able to come out of this condition and that we come out of it effectively. But when leadership comes out to tell us otherwise, that things are rosy and things will be well, and then the decadence that we continue to go on a downward spiral in terms of what our economic situation is in our nation, that is where I have a problem. We want leadership to bite the bullet, leadership to come and talk to us as a people in the way of engaging us.
The solutions may not be new, but how should they be taken going forward?
Well, I'm not too sure if I even get a drift of the question.
It's still the question that hinges on the implementation phase.
Yes. But the missing link now is because of the action plan. You see, when you see an action plan, you see, for instance, let me take the Kufuor one. If you go for the action, the section, you have a key policy issue. It says improve financial resource mobilization, then or reduce import exemptions to the barest minimum. Then you go, they have recommended actions. Review current import exemption structure to ensure that all exemptions are justified and to curtail abuse. Then you have implementing agencies, Ministry of Finance, cooperating agency, that is SERPS, IRS, VAT, the indicator of achievement. Review completed with recommended changes in exemptions. This was 2002. So this showed that by 2002, they had been able to deal with this particular one, which was a recommendation of 2001. Now, in the absence of the action plan and the timelines given, it's difficult for me to do a specific, suggestion. I hope you understand, except to do a general thing, back to the point we've made already, that it's the lack of sustainability, which is driven by the poor quality of economic management and lack of fiscal discipline. Otherwise, we need, this discussion is fair, it's fine, because the forum has ended, they've given us 22-point communique, so we have every right, we are entitled to come and interrogate those issues. But I think as early as possible, we will need the detailed one, the one that comes with the action plans and the recommended actions, as well as the timelines. That one, then we can all be monitoring and evaluating. And in so doing, we can do a checklist as to whether they are fulfilling the targets or not fulfilling. Otherwise, one is at a risk of just indulging in generalizations and then drawing conclusions on basis of those generalizations. But I wanted to clarify one or two things. And it's back again with the Asabi thing about the National Development Planning Commission. As we all know, and you see that's the critical thing, you kept on asking questions about what the MPP will do and not do. It's a very, very difficult area. Because if you go to the Constitutional Review Commission,
right.
and last week I referred to it, and especially the government's own white paper, which I'm sure I need not...
It's rejected making it a binding document on anybody, the consultative process.
Yes, that's the National Development Planning Commission. Even in the Constitution and the Acts, do not make that planning commission mandatory.
Right.
It doesn't give it any legal authority to enforce adherence to its plans. There are thousands of plans out there. In fact, I've been going through, some are wonderful, fantastic documents. Big, some are bulky, some are very small, thousands of them. But here we are, this government's own white paper on the Constitution Review Commission shows that, look, we don't want any long-term development plan that will bind political parties because they have different ideological and political perspectives.
Right.
So we are already confronted with a certain challenge. I think that the most important thing is, you see, the quality of management. It's not so much ideological perspective. You have an economic reality. How are you managing that reality in order to improve on it? It must come with a certain skill, some level of competence, some level of professionalism. One ideological block, it's not a preserve of an ideological block. That's my candid opinion. Okay?
Right.
And finally, Asabi, I am not too sure that the National Development Planning Commission was the instrument that was used to organize the economic dialogue.
That was the coordinating.
You had a coordinating committee, the National Economic Dialogue Coordinating Committee.
No.
Yes. Oh yes, oh yes. See,
you finish.
No, it's here. I mean,
Finish
Dr.
your point.
Ndum, what was Dr. Ndum's position?
Finish
He was a
your point.
member.
No,
Yes,
he
he
was
was.
the chairman of the commission.
No, yes, but that is here.
He was a commission
No, well,
chairman.
GNA report, 28th May 2003. It says, this is after Mr. Kufuor had spoken. Dr. Ndum, Minister of Energy, a member, at that time, he had become Minister of Energy, a member of the National Economic Dialogue Coordinating Committee, said it was important to note that the National Economic Dialogue was not just about narrow economy. Quote, this is the only broad-based national dialogue Ghana has that brings together people from all walks of life in consultation and to shape a way forward. This national dialogue does not belong to anyone, institution, government agency, or sector of the economy.
Okay.
It belongs to all of us. Indeed, it was driven not by the National Development Planning Commission. They had an input, but a coordinating committee had been put in
What date
place.
is the GRA report? What date?
This is 28th May 2003. And
But
indeed,
you see, 2 years or 3 years after we finished the two dialogues, indeed, the beginning of it, that is what I mentioned, the 2001 when we began, I was then with Jacob Obechebi as the chief of staff, and I had to move into the the then Flagstaff House. And
so you are
Dr.
talking
Park
of 2001.
I was
but
there was no
2002 one. Yes,
but he had already moved away, so he was trying to say he was.
This is Dr. Indum. This is Dr. Indum's own opening address. I have it here.
He
was Minister of Economic Planning and Regional Commission, Corporation. Regional Corporation, that's how it's been put here.
Okay.
And as Mr. Kufuor indicated, when they finished, they put in place an oversight committee. Let me quote Mr. Kufuor here. See, please listen. He says, I wish to thank you all for coming back for this review. This is 2002. An oversight committee with wide-range membership to enable government track the use to which recommendations were put has been working throughout the year. Happily, it reports that some headway has been made. Significantly, it must be noted that most of the recommendations that emerged from the dialogue coincided with the government's own plans. So you see, a government can have a program and can have a plan, and yet can engage in a dialogue or a forum, expecting some other views to come on board and complement those programs that government already has.
Okay.
Right or wrong?
Thank you.
I did not disagree with you, but what I was the coordinator.
You're saying that the NDPC played the lead role.
Indeed.
No. From what he says.
In terms of organizing,
because he's proving with evidence. I don't know what else
even after the event, an oversight committee was put in
but
place.
we don't know the
who was the oversight
committee.
No. You were there.
I was the coordinator.
But I was an analyst and a researcher of what was happening. Can I finish? I am saying that there's a distinction between an oversight committee and the NDPC. The NDPC, there could be a collaboration or there could be some interconnections. Okay. But there's clearly a distinction between an oversight committee.
Briefly,
you do that.
You will not have the finance here on this. Listen to me.
Of course not.
You won't. I was the coordinator. Listen to me on the 3 occasions. And let me tell you, that oversight committee that you're talking about brought ministers of state together. Asafo was one. He was the Minister of Finance. Kwesindom had then moved into energy. He was still a member. Apreku, I think, was a trade or something.
Yeah,
he was a member. Listen to me. But we all operated under the commission. Indeed, the Judge Mensah had then taken over, I think, from Dr. Indum as chairman of the commission. And I had to move my office. Listen to me.
Have I spoken?
So, but you are getting ready to speak.
I was going to show you that.
We are moving on. Just finish. Just move on.
And so I had to move my office from even the castle to the Flagstaff House then. So Kweku cannot, the GRA report doesn't summarize what was happening. I was a living witness.
But he has another document.
That document, I'm just saying, this is a speech.
Let's be honest. This is the action plan. They give you the key policy issue. They give you recommended actions. They then tell you implementing the lead. And the lead, they cite all of them. In 100 cases, you don't see NDPC. It's here. Take a look at it.
Listen. NDPC don't have a budget.
You see, we should be fair. We should be fair with the facts. It doesn't really mean anything.
I think Kweku doesn't want to listen to me.
You have explained
NDPC doesn't have a budget. NDPC don't have a budget. And ministries have a budget. But then NDPC being the planning commission,
then it was just a name. It was very cosmetic.
No.
Yes, the people that don't have a budget,
I don't know how you and Kweku agree on this. Listen, it's not a fact.
But I'm holding your own document here.
Kweku, listen to me.
This is wrong with evidence.
Can I speak? What you are arguing for, Kweku, is the implementing groups, which are ministers with budgets. So they were told, you go and do this. Oh, listen. You are the minister or the ministry. You go and complete this on so and so date. So they had the money. NDPC didn't have a budget in terms of the implementation, but they were supervising the job we're doing. I moved my office physically to the NDPC office.
Who is NDPC? You mean the technocrats were supervising you?
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you.
How can a junior officer be supervising ministers?
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Felix Kofi Selassie says that Mr. Malik is a true patriot. We need to discuss the health of our economy in a dispassionate manner. We hope that this consensus is implemented. I think that's the bottom line, that the consensus will be implemented. Henry Palmer says, I think Honorable proposed scenario that although killing is a crime in the laws of Ghana, we still go to the courts. It's a bit faulty. We go to court with cases of murder, not to determine whether murder is a crime, but to prove that the accused actually committed the crime. Thank you very much. Frederick Larson also has some points, and he's saying that in San Francisco, California, university lecturers, economists, civil society groups, political parties, well-meaning Ghanaians have always called out our problems and provided solutions. What do we need? What we do need? Okay, what do we need this bogus Konum for? Another total waste of taxpayers' coins. Any well-meaning Ghanaian who attended this money-drenching event betrayed this country. Okay, so very interesting perspectives by
when they are borrowing
people.
left and right and center, and they cannot manage the deficit. And who calls them?
Okay, John Owusu says, Samson, it is important to tell the president and his administration that there is the need to walk the talk. Ghanaians are very tired of numerous unfulfilling promises. Governance is a very serious business. So what was Kuyadonko? Okay, sorry, please don't go that way. And I have deliberately sought to, ignore some of those text messages as well. Like Mr. Pepo said, let's respect her views, no matter how, crude we think they were. Okay, thank you very much.